My name is Matt, I'm 32 years old, and until last month I thought I had the perfect life. Great tech career, beautiful girlfriend, and a close-knit family who gathered every Sunday for dinner without fail. Then came the night my parents looked me in the eyes and said, "From today, consider yourself a stranger." I stood frozen, staring at the locked door, my key suddenly useless. 1 week later, an urgent email appeared. "We have a problem. Call immediately." Before I tell you what happened next, let me know where you're watching from. Hit the like and subscribe buttons if you've ever felt betrayed by someone you trusted completely. Growing up in suburban Chicago, my family appeared picture-perfect to outsiders. My father, Robert, was a successful business executive who ran his household with the same precision and discipline he applied to his company. He believed in structure, achievement, and maintaining appearances at all costs. A tall man with salt and pepper hair that never seemed out of place, he commanded respect in every room he entered. My mother, Eleanor, complimented him perfectly as the quintessential homemaker with impeccable social standards. She served on numerous charity boards, hosted the most elegant dinner parties in our neighborhood, and never had a hair out of place. Behind her warm smile and perfectly coordinated outfits was a woman who valued social status above almost everything else. Then there was my sister Amanda, 2 years younger than me, but somehow always miles ahead in our parents' eyes. She was the golden child who effortlessly met every expectation they set. Perfect grades, perfect extracurriculars, perfect friends from perfect families. While I struggled to earn A's in advanced math, Amanda seemed to ace everything without breaking a sweat. When she went on to study business and economics at our father's alma mater, his pride was unmistakable. I, on the other hand, was the son who never quite measured up. Not that I was a disappointment on paper. I maintained solid grades, stayed out of trouble, and eventually built a successful career in tech security. But somehow, it was never enough. If I brought home an A-, the question was always why it wasn't an A+. If I landed a good job, the conversation would inevitably turn to how it wasn't as prestigious as banking or law. The subtle favoritism wasn't obvious to outsiders, but to me it was as clear as day. When Amanda received a new car for her 16th birthday, I got driving lessons and access to the family's old sedan. When she made a mistake, it was a learning opportunity. When I made one, it was a character flaw. These differences weren't dramatic enough to complain about without sounding petty, but they accumulated over years, creating an invisible wall between us. Despite this, I craved my parents' approval. I pushed myself through college, graduated with honors in computer science, despite my father's disappointment that I hadn't chosen business, and worked my way up in the tech industry. Each achievement was another attempt to prove my worth, to show that my path was valid too. The Sunday dinner tradition began when I moved out for college. Family stays connected. My mother insisted, and so every Sunday at 5 o'clock sharp, we gathered around the mahogany dining table, regardless of what else was happening in our lives. For 15 years, I never missed a single one. Even when I had deadlines looming or had to fly back early from business trips, Sunday, dinner was sacrosanct. These dinners followed a predictable pattern: mother's gourmet, cooking, father's questions about our careers and achievements, Amanda's perfect updates, and my contributions that somehow always felt inadequate. Still, they were family, and this was our tradition. I believed it mattered. In recent years, I'd noticed increasing tension at these gatherings. As Amanda married Thomas, a financial analyst from a wealthy family that our parents adored, the contrast between our lives became even more pronounced. Thomas fit perfectly into the family with his conservative views and traditional ambitions. Meanwhile, my focus on building innovative security systems for tech companies was seen as interesting, but not quite as respectable. 3 months ago, I received a major promotion to Chief Security Officer at my company, along with industry recognition for a security protocol I'd developed. When I shared the news at dinner, my father nodded and said, "That's nice, son," before immediately turning to Amanda to ask about Thomas's progress toward making partner at his firm. My mother simply asked if this meant I'd finally be able to afford a house in a better neighborhood. What they didn't understand was that I was thriving on my own terms. My apartment in the city might not have been in their preferred neighborhood, but it was exactly where I wanted to be. My career wasn't following their prescribed path, but I was respected in my field, and making a difference in digital security. I had built a life I was proud of, even if it didn't fit their narrow definition of success. Looking back now, I can see that the perfect family facade had been cracking for years. We maintained the appearance of closeness while growing further apart in values and expectations. But nothing prepared me for how completely that facade would shatter over one Sunday dinner that changed everything. The real catalyst for change came into my life about a year ago, when I met Jessica at a coffee shop near my office. She was struggling with her laptop while trying to prepare for a job interview, and I offered to help. One conversation led to another, and soon we were meeting regularly. Jessica was different from anyone I'd dated before. She was a kindergarten teacher divorced and had a 6-year-old daughter named Lily. She was warm, genuine, and completely uninterested in status or appearances. When I first mentioned Jessica to my parents, my mother's immediate response was telling divorced with a child, "Oh, Matt, that sounds complicated." My father didn't say anything directly, but his expression spoke volumes. I tried to ignore their reaction, telling myself that they would warm up to her once they met her. 3 months into our relationship, I brought Jessica to Sunday dinner. She dressed nicely, brought a homemade dessert, and made every effort to connect with my family. But throughout the evening, my mother made subtle digs about the challenges of blended families and asked pointed questions about Jessica's ex-husband. When Jessica mentioned she was looking for a better school district for Lily, my mother suggested that children of divorce already face enough challenges without changing schools too. That night, for the first time ever, I confronted my mother about her behavior. In the kitchen, away from Jessica, I told her that her comments were inappropriate and hurtful. "I'm just concerned about you," she replied. "A ready-made family is a lot to take on. You could have anyone, Matt." "I want Jessica," I said firmly. "And I love Lily too. If you can't respect that, then maybe we need to rethink these dinners." My mother looked shocked that I would even suggest breaking tradition. My father, overhearing the conversation, stepped in. "Your mother is just looking out for your best interests. We've seen many young men make impulsive decisions they later regret." "I'm 31 years old," I reminded him. "Hardly a young, impulsive man." The tension from that night never fully dissipated. Jessica was reluctant to attend future dinners, but I insisted we shouldn't let my parents drive us apart. In retrospect, I was still trying to gain their approval, rather than standing firmly in my own choices. As our relationship grew more serious, the pressure from my family increased. My mother would send me links to articles about the difficulties of dating single mothers. My father would mention friends' sons, who had recently gotten engaged to lovely girls from good families. Amanda, always loyal to our parents' viewpoint, started asking if I was really sure about taking on another man's responsibility. Meanwhile, Jessica and I were building something beautiful together. Lily began to look forward to our time together, asking when I would visit next. We established our own little traditions like Saturday morning pancakes and Sunday afternoon trips to the park. I found myself thinking about the future, about making our arrangement permanent. One evening, after putting Lily to bed following a day at the zoo, Jessica and I sat on her porch swing. "She asked me if you were going to be her new dad," Jessica said quietly. My heart swelled. "Would that be okay with you?" I asked. Jessica's eyes filled with tears. "More than okay." That conversation was the push I needed. The following week, I went ring shopping. I found a vintage sapphire ring that reminded me of Jessica's eyes and arranged financing that stretched my budget but felt worth every penny. My friend Ben helped me plan the perfect proposal for the following month at the Botanical Gardens, where we'd had our third date. "What about your parents?" Ben asked, as we finalized the plans. "How do you think they'll take it?" "They'll have to accept it," I said with more confidence than I felt. "Once they see how happy we are, they'll come around." Ben looked skeptical. "Just be prepared, man. From what you've told me about them, this might not go as smoothly as you hope." I decided to share my plans with my family at the upcoming Sunday dinner. Jessica would be taking Lily to visit her grandmother that weekend, so I could tell my parents privately and hopefully work through any initial resistance before involving her. I rehearsed what I would say, preparing counter-arguments for every objection I could anticipate. The night before that fateful dinner, Jessica called to wish me luck. "Remember, whatever they say or think doesn't change us," she reassured me. "We're solid." "I know," I replied, drawing strength from her confidence. "I'm not asking for their permission, just giving them a chance to be happy for us." And if they're not? She asked gently. Then that's their loss. I said, not yet understanding how prophetic those words would prove to be. Sunday arrived with an unusual sense of foreboding. Normally I approached family dinners with mild resignation, but that day, my stomach was in knots as I drove to my parents' suburban home. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across their perfectly manicured lawn as I parked behind Amanda's luxury SUV. I took a deep breath, patted the ring box in my pocket for reassurance, and headed inside using my key. The atmosphere struck me as odd immediately. Instead of my mother's usual greeting from the kitchen, the house was eerily quiet. I found them all in the living room, my father standing by the fireplace, my mother perched tensely on the edge of her favorite armchair, Amanda and Thomas sitting close together on the sofa. They looked up when I entered, their expressions, a mixture of grim determination and something else I couldn't quite identify. "You're right on time," my father said, checking his watch instead of meeting my eyes. "Always," I replied, trying to keep my tone light despite the palpable tension. "Is everything okay?" "Let's move to the dining room," my mother said instead of answering. "Dinner is ready." The meal was uncharacteristically silent. My mother had prepared pot roast, my favorite as a child, but now it felt like a calculated move, rather than a gesture of affection. Amanda kept glancing between our parents and me, while Thomas seemed unusually interested in his food. I tried several times to initiate normal conversation, asking about Amanda's work and my parents' recent charity gala, but received only clipped responses. Finally, as my mother served dessert, I decided it was time. Whatever strange mood had settled over the family, I had come with a purpose. "I have some news I'd like to share." I began setting down my fork. "It's important to me, and I hope you'll be happy about it." My father raised his hand to stop me. "Before you continue, Matt, there's something we need to discuss." The certainty in his voice made me pause. "Okay, what is it?" My father exchanged glances with my mother, who gave a small nod. "It's about Jessica," he said, pronouncing her name like it left a bad taste in his mouth. My stomach dropped. "What about her?" "We've been concerned about your relationship for some time now," my mother interjected. "The situation with her divorce, the child, her background. It all seemed rather convenient that she would latch on to someone like you." "Latch on to me?" I repeated, disbelieving. "What are you talking about?" My father pulled a folder from beside his chair and placed it on the table. "We hired someone to look into her background." I stared at the folder, then at my parents, unable to process what I was hearing. "You did what?" "It was necessary," my mother said firmly. "We had to protect you and the family reputation." With trembling hands, I opened the folder to find photographs of Jessica at various locations, copies of her divorce papers, financial records, and a typed report with sections highlighted in yellow. It was a complete invasion of her privacy. A clinical dissection of her life without her knowledge or consent. "This is disgusting," I said, my voice barely controlled. "You had no right." "We had every right," my father countered. "And it's a good thing we did. Did you know she was nearly bankrupt after her divorce? That she's fighting a custody battle? That her ex-husband has made allegations about her fitness as a mother?" Each question hit like a physical blow. Yes, I knew about her financial struggles after her ex left her with joint debts. Yes, I knew he had briefly threatened to seek full custody to avoid paying child support. These weren't secrets Jessica had kept from me, but parts of her life she had shared as our trust grew. "None of this is new information to me," I said, closing the folder and pushing it away. "Jessica has been completely honest about the challenges she's faced." "Then you're even more naive than we feared," my mother said. "She's obviously looking for financial security, a father figure for her daughter, and social stability. You're a successful young man from a good family. Can't you see you're being used?" The accusation was so absurd, I almost laughed. Jessica was one of the most fiercely independent people I knew. She had refused even small gifts in the early months of our relationship, insisting on paying her own way despite her tight budget. "You don't know her at all," I said, "and you clearly don't know me either if you think I would be so easily manipulated." "Son," my father's tone shifted to one he used when closing business deals, "we're simply asking you to reconsider this relationship before you make a commitment you'll regret. Take some time, date other women, someone more suitable. That's when I realized they somehow knew about my plans to propose. I looked at Amanda, who quickly averted her eyes. You told them, I said. It wasn't a question. Ben called me, she admitted quietly. He was concerned about how Mom and Dad would react. He thought if they had some time to prepare. So you all conspired behind my back, I said, the betrayal cutting deep. You investigated the woman I love like she's a criminal, and you sit here judging her when you've never even tried to know her. We're trying to protect you, my father insisted. No. I stood up, unable to remain seated any longer. You're trying to control me. You always have been. Nothing I do is ever good enough unless it fits your narrow vision of success. Well, I'm done seeking your approval. I pulled the ring box from my pocket and set it on the table. I came here tonight to tell you that I'm going to ask Jessica to marry me. I wasn't asking for permission, just sharing my happiness with my family. But clearly that was a mistake. My mother gasped, staring at the box. You can't be serious. After everything we've just told you, everything you've told me only confirms what I already knew. Jessica has overcome incredible challenges with grace and strength. She's rebuilt her life after a painful divorce. She's an amazing mother, and she loves me for who I am, not what I can provide or how I make the family look. My father's face hardened. If you do this, you need to consider the consequences. What consequences? I challenged. We cannot support this decision, he said coldly. If you choose to marry this woman, you'll do it without our blessing or our help. I don't need your help. You'll also do it without being part of this family, my mother added, her voice breaking slightly. The room went silent. Even Amanda looked shocked. Are you giving me an ultimatum? I asked quietly. We're asking you to make a choice, my father replied. Your family or this relationship. I looked around the dining room at the family portraits on the wall, showing perfect smiles that hid years of conditional love and impossible standards. I thought about Jessica and Lily, who accepted me completely, who filled my life with genuine joy rather than constant evaluation. That's not a choice at all, I said finally. I choose Jessica. I choose happiness. My mother started crying, but there was something performative about it that only strengthened my resolve. Then we have nothing more to discuss, my father said, standing up. From today, consider yourself a stranger to this family. Don't come back, don't call, don't expect anything from us. Robert, Amanda protested, surely that's too extreme. He silenced her with a look. I won't have decades of building this family's reputation ruined by his poor judgment. I felt oddly calm as I picked up the ring box and pocketed it again. If your reputation is more important than your son's happiness, then you're right. We have nothing more to discuss. I walked out of the dining room expecting someone to call me back to say this had gone too far. No one did. At the front door, I turned to see my father following me, expressionless. Your key, he said, holding out his hand. I removed my house key from my key ring and placed it in his palm. Without another word, he closed the door in my face. I heard the deadbolt turn, followed by the security chain. I stood there frozen, staring at the locked door, the spare key I still had in my pocket, suddenly useless against the changed locks and my changed life. In the space of one dinner, I had become an exile from my own family. The drive home passed in a blur. Streetlights smeared across my windshield as I blinked back tears that I refused to shed. Not for them, not anymore. I pulled into my parking garage and sat in silence for several minutes, trying to process the seismic shift that had just occurred in my life. Then I called Jessica. How did it go? She asked, her voice hopeful. Not great, I said, my voice steadier than I expected. Actually, that's an understatement. They disowned me. Her shocked silence spoke volumes. Matt, I'm so sorry. What happened? I gave her the condensed version, leaving out the most hurtful accusations. Those could wait until we were face to face. The bottom line is, they gave me an ultimatum, you or them. It wasn't a difficult choice. Oh, Matt. Her voice cracked. I never wanted to come between you and your family. You didn't, I assured her. They did this, not you. Their conditions, their ultimatum, their choice, to shut me out rather than accept who I love. After we hung up, I entered my empty apartment, which suddenly felt too quiet, too empty. I poured myself a whiskey and sat in the dark replaying the dinner conversation, wondering if there was something I could have said differently, some way I could have made them understand. But deep down, I knew this confrontation had been brewing for years, perhaps my entire life. Jessica wasn't the cause, just the catalyst that finally exposed the conditional nature of my parents' love. The next morning, reality hit hard. I had lost my family. The people who had been constants in my life, however flawed, were suddenly gone. I tried calling Amanda hoping she might act as an intermediary, but she sounded tearful and distant. "They're really upset, Matt. Dad's talked about changing the locks and removing your photos. Mom keeps crying. I think you should give it some time." "Did you tell them that what they did was wrong?" I asked. "The investigation? The ultimatum? All of it." Her silence was answer enough. "You agree with them," I realized. "I just think Jessica complicates things," she said carefully. "Your life was on such a good track before." "My life is better now than it's ever been," I told her. "I'm sorry you can't see that." That was the last real conversation we had. After that, my calls went to voicemail, my texts received brief non-committal responses, and eventually nothing at all. The isolation spread beyond my immediate family. My cousin Marcus, who I'd been close with since childhood, called to say he felt caught in the middle and needed to step back. Two aunts who had always sent birthday cards and Christmas gifts suddenly went silent. Even family friends I'd known for decades seemed to vanish. It was as if a memo had gone out: "Matt Lewis is no longer acknowledged." The impact spilled into my professional life as well. I found myself staring at code that normally came easily to me, unable to focus. Security protocols that I could previously recite in my sleep now required double-checking. My boss Keith called me into his office after I missed an important deadline. "Is everything all right, Matt? This isn't like you." I hadn't planned to share my personal problems at work, but Keith's genuine concern broke through my defenses. I gave him a simplified version of the family rupture. "Take some personal days," he suggested. "Get your head straight. The work will be here when you get back, and we need you at 100%. I appreciated his understanding, but declined the offer. Work was the one area of my life where I still felt competent, in control. I couldn't afford to lose that too. My colleagues noticed something was wrong, despite my attempts to maintain normalcy. Lunch invitations became more frequent, as did check-ins and offers to help with projects. Their kindness only highlighted what my family had thrown away. Jessica was my rock throughout those first difficult weeks. She listened without judgment, held me when the grief hit unexpectedly, and never once suggested that I try to reconcile at the cost of my self-respect. Lily, with a child's intuitive understanding of emotional undercurrents, started bringing me her favorite stuffed animals when I seemed sad. "Mr. Bunny makes me feel better when I'm sad," she explained solemnly, placing a well-loved rabbit in my lap. "You can borrow him." These small moments of tenderness kept me anchored when everything else felt adrift. I also started seeing a therapist, Dr. Michaels, who specialized in family estrangement. Our sessions helped me understand that what I was experiencing was a form of grief. "You're mourning the loss of your family," she explained, "but also the loss of the family you thought you had, the one that would love you unconditionally." She helped me see patterns I'd never recognized before. How I'd spent my life trying to earn approval that should have been freely given, how my parents had used that need to control my choices. How Amanda had been both beneficiary and victim of their manipulative love. "What if they never come around?" I asked during one particularly difficult session. "What if this is permanent?" "Then you build your life without them," she said simply. "Many people create families of choice that are healthier and more supportive than their families of origin." I was already seeing evidence of this. Ben and his wife Rachel started including Jessica, Lily, and me in their family gatherings. Jessica's mother, Susan, embraced me without reservation, telling me I was welcome in their family regardless of what my parents thought. Colleagues became friends, who checked in regularly and invited us to weekend barbecues and holiday celebrations. Slowly, painfully, I began to rebuild my sense of belonging around people who accepted me as I was not as they wished me to be. The hole left by my family's rejection was still there, a tender spot I tried not to probe too often, but it was gradually being surrounded by new connections, healthier ones based on mutual respect rather than obligation and Didier. Control. And then, just as I was beginning to find my footing in this new reality, the email arrived. The message appeared in my inbox, exactly 1 week after the disastrous dinner. The sender was Howard Goldman, my father's longtime lawyer, and the family's legal advisor for over 20 years. The subject line was simple but ominous. Urgent matter, please contact immediately. The body of the email was equally cryptic. Matt, we have a problem that requires your immediate attention. Please call my office as soon as possible. This is time-sensitive and of critical importance. I stared at the message for a long time, my finger hovering over the delete button. Part of me wanted to ignore it completely, to return the silent treatment my family had been giving me. But another part, the responsible part that had always done what was expected, couldn't dismiss something described as urgent and critical. I showed the email to Jessica that evening. What do you think it means? She considered it carefully. Could be anything. Maybe they're contesting your inheritance, or something legal about the family. Or maybe they realize they made a terrible mistake and want to apologize, I said, not really believing it. Jessica gave me a gentle but skeptical look. Based on what you've told me about them, that seems unlikely, but you won't know unless you call. Should I, though, after everything they said about you, about us? She took my hand. That's entirely your decision. Whatever you choose, I support you. Just make sure you're doing it for the right reasons, not because you're hoping for an apology that might never come. I spent a restless night weighing my options. By morning, curiosity had won out over pride. I called Goldman's office as soon as it opened. His secretary put me through immediately, another sign that whatever this was, it was indeed urgent. Matt Goldman's voice was tense, lacking its usual polished calm. Thank you for calling back so quickly. What's this about, Howard? I asked, bypassing pleasantries. There's a situation at your father's company. A significant one. I understand there's been some personal friction between you and your parents, but this matter transcends family disagreements. What kind of situation? A security breach. A major one. The company's entire infrastructure has been compromised. He paused. They need your expertise, Matt. You're the only one who fully understands the systems you built for them. The irony wasn't lost on me. 5 years ago, I had developed a comprehensive security system for my father's company as it expanded its digital operations. I'd done it at cost as a favor to the family, even though similar work for other clients would have earned me substantial consulting fees. When I'd completed the implementation, my father had thanked me, with a firm handshake and a good job, son, that I'd treasured more than I cared to admit. What exactly happened? I asked, professional curiosity overriding my personal grievances. I'm not technically savvy enough to explain it properly. But from what I understand, someone has breached the firewall and gained access to sensitive client data, financial records, everything. They're completely exposed. I winced, despite myself. Have they brought in external consultants? They've tried. 2 different security firms. But the system architecture is proprietary based on your design. No one can navigate it efficiently enough to stop the bleeding. I closed my eyes, knowing what was coming next. Your father asked me to reach out, Goldman continued. He's not one to admit when he needs help, as you know. But the company is in real jeopardy here. 200 employees, clients who depend on their services, decades of work at risk. 200 employees. People with families, mortgages, children in college. People who had nothing to do with my parents' behavior toward me or Jessica. What exactly are they asking for? I said carefully. Your assistance in identifying and fixing the vulnerability, on a consulting basis, professionally compensated, of course. And my father approved this request, after telling me I'm no longer part of the family. Goldman cleared his throat uncomfortably. He authorized me to do whatever was necessary to address the security crisis. The details of how that happens are flexible. Translation: my father was too proud to ask for help directly, but desperate enough to let his lawyer do it for him. I need to think about this, I said finally. I understand, but please don't take too long. The situation is deteriorating by the hour. After hanging up, I called Ben, who had become my primary sounding board since the family rupture. Let them burn, was his immediate response. After what they did to you and Jessica, they deserve whatever happens. But 200 employee, don't I countered. Not your problem, man. Your dad made his choice. Now he can live with the consequences. I understood Ben's anger on my behalf, but something felt wrong about punishing innocent people for my parents' actions. Still uncertain, I discussed it with Jessica that evening. What do you think I should do? I asked, after explaining the situation. She considered the question carefully. What would you do if this were any other company that had treated a consultant badly? Would you still help them? Probably, I admitted. But I'd set clear boundaries and expectations. Then do that, she said simply. Be professional. Help because it's the right thing to do, not because they're family. And definitely not because you're hoping this will magically fix your relationship with them. But what about everything they said about you? How can I work with people who investigated you and made those accusations? Jessica squeezed my hand. Their opinion of me doesn't define me, Matt. We know the truth about our relationship. If you want to help because it's the right professional thing to do, then do it with clear boundaries. If you don't want to help because the bridge is burned, that's valid too. But don't make your decision based on defending my honor. I don't need that. Her maturity and perspective helped clarify my thinking. By morning, I had made my decision. I called Goldman back. I'll help, I said, without preamble. But I have conditions. Name them, he replied, relief evident in his voice. First, this is strictly professional. I'm not coming as a son, but as a security consultant with specialized knowledge of their systems. I'll expect to be treated with professional courtesy and respect. Of course. Second, I want a formal consulting contract with my standard rates, plus an emergency response premium. I'll email you my terms. That can be arranged. Third, and this is non-negotiable, there will be no discussions about my personal life, my relationship with Jessica, or anything unrelated to the security problem. If anyone violates that boundary, I walk immediately contract penalty or not. There was a pause. I'll make that clear to all parties. Fourth, I want an apology to Jessica for the invasion of privacy. They hired someone to investigate her, Howard. That's not just morally wrong, it's potentially illegal. This time the pause was longer. I'll convey that request, but I can't guarantee it. Then I can't guarantee I'll be able to fix their problem, I countered. Those are my terms. Take them or leave them. Another pause. I'll call you back within the hour. 45 minutes later, my phone rang. Your terms have been accepted, Goldman said. All of them. I felt a complex mix of emotions. Professional satisfaction at having my boundaries respected, lingering anger at the situation, and deep apprehension about seeing my family again. But beneath it all was a quiet certainty that I was doing the right thing, not for them, but for the innocent employees caught in the crossfire of our family drama. I'll be there tomorrow morning, I said, already mentally preparing for one of the most difficult meetings of my life. The next morning I pulled into the visitor parking space at Lewis Financial Solutions, a building I'd visited countless times as a son, but never as an outside consultant. I dressed more formally than usual armor, against the emotional complexity of the situation. Crisp suit, polished shoes, briefcase containing everything I might need. Jessica had straightened my tie before I left, a small gesture of support that meant the world. Remember who you are, she'd said, not who they want you to be. The receptionist, Diane, did a double take when I entered. Matt, it's been ages. Your father didn't mention you were coming in today. I'm here as a consultant for the security issue, I explained, keeping my tone professional. Howard Goldman should have arranged everything. Her smile faltered slightly at my formality, but she quickly recovered. Of course, they're waiting for you in the main conference room. Walking through the office felt surreal. Employees I'd known for years greeted me warmly, unaware of the family drama that had transformed me from son to stranger. I nodded politely but maintained my professional distance, focusing on the task ahead rather than the whispers that followed me down the hallway. The conference room door was closed. I took a deep breath, squared my shoulders, and knocked once before entering. My father sat at the head of the table, looking older than he had just a week ago. Beside him was my mother, her perfect appearance, slightly frayed at the edges, missing her usual immaculate polish. Amanda sat across from her, eyes downcast, while Thomas occupied the chair farthest from the door. Howard Goldman completed the gathering, his legal pad ready for notes. "Good morning," I said, addressing the room rather than any individual. "I understand you have a security situation that needs addressing." My father cleared his throat. "Thank you for coming, Matt. We appreciate your willingness to help despite recent events." I nodded, but didn't acknowledge the oblique reference to my disownment. "Let's focus on the technical issue. What exactly has happened, and when did you first notice it?" For the next 20 minutes, my father and Thomas outlined the situation. 3 days ago, they had discovered unusual activity in their client database. Initial investigation revealed that someone had been accessing sensitive financial records for weeks, possibly months. Client information had been viewed, and there were signs that some data had been extracted. 2 security firms had been unable to determine the extent of the breach or close the vulnerability. "The system keeps locking us out of our own records," Thomas explained. "We can't tell what's been compromised or how they're getting in." I opened my laptop. "I'll need admin access to the main server and the security logs from the past 6 months." My father slid a folder across the table. "All the access credentials are in here. You have full authorization to do whatever's necessary." I spent the next 3 hours deep in code, barely aware of the people coming and going from the conference room. The situation was worse than they had described. The intruder had exceptional knowledge of the system's architecture, suggesting either an inside job or a highly sophisticated attack. More concerning was the fact that the vulnerability wasn't new. Someone had been inside the system for at least 8 months, quietly gathering information. What troubled me most was that I recognized the pattern. During my initial implementation of the security system, I had warned my father about several potential vulnerabilities that required regular updates and monitoring. I'd provided a detailed maintenance schedule and recommended hiring a dedicated security specialist to manage ongoing protection. Looking at the logs now, it was clear those recommendations had been ignored. The system hadn't been properly updated in over 2 years. By mid-afternoon, I had identified the primary breach point and developed a temporary patch to prevent further intrusion. But the deeper I dug, the more concerning the situation became. This wasn't a random attack. The intruder had specifically targeted financial records related to the company's largest clients, following a pattern that suggested they knew exactly what they were looking for. At 5 o'clock, I called everyone back to the conference room for a briefing. "I've implemented emergency security measures that should prevent further unauthorized access." I began displaying diagrams on the large screen. "But this is a stopgap solution, not a permanent fix." "How bad is the damage?" my father asked. "Significant," I replied honestly. "Someone has had access to your most sensitive client data for months. They've been methodical, careful, and extremely knowledgeable about your system architecture." "How is that possible?" Amanda asked. "Isn't the system proprietary?" "It is," I confirmed, "which means the intruder either had inside help or is someone who already had legitimate access to the system." A heavy silence fell over the room. "Are you suggesting one of our employees is responsible?" my father asked, his voice tight. "I'm not making any accusations yet. But yes, that's one possibility we need to consider. The attack pattern shows intimate knowledge of both the system and the company's client structure." I turned to a new screen showing access logs. There's something else. I found evidence of systematic data manipulation beyond simple information gathering. Someone has been making small, nearly undetectable adjustments to financial records over the past 6 months. "What kind of adjustments?" Goldman asked sharply. "Primarily redirecting small amounts from multiple accounts into a holding pattern that would eventually allow for bulk extraction. It's sophisticated. The amounts are small enough that no single client would notice, but in aggregate we're talking about potentially millions over time." My father's face had gone pale. "That's not just a security breach, that's embezzlement." "Yes," I agreed. "And based on the access patterns and timing, it's someone with high-level authorization. Only 5 people in the company have the necessary clearance to make these kinds of changes." I displayed the list of users with that level of access. My father's name was there, as was Amanda's. The company's CFO was third, followed by the head of IT. The 5th name on the list was Thomas. Amanda gasped. "You can't possibly think any of us would do this." I'm just presenting the facts, I said evenly. The evidence shows that someone with administrative access has been systematically manipulating financial records. All 5 people on this list need to be investigated. This is absurd. Thomas spoke up for the first time, his voice carrying an edge I'd never heard before. I've been working day and night trying to fix this breach. Which would be a good cover if you were the one who created it, I pointed out. That's enough, my father interrupted. We're not going to start accusing family members without concrete evidence. The irony of his statement wasn't lost on me. A week ago, you were perfectly comfortable accusing Jessica based on a private investigator's report. Now you're reluctant to consider evidence of actual wrongdoing. My mother flinched. My father's jaw tightened. That was different. Was it I challenged? Or is it just that Jessica was an easier target because she wasn't family? By your definition. Matt Goldman interjected. Let's stay focused on the security issue. I am focused, I replied. And the evidence points to internal sabotage. I can continue the investigation, but only if you're prepared to follow it wherever it leads, even if that's uncomfortable. My father looked torn, glancing between Amanda and Thomas. What do you need to proceed? Full access to all financial records for the past year. Personal devices used by anyone on the admin list. And complete cooperation from everyone involved. That's invasive and unnecessary, Thomas protested. Surely there are less intrusive methods. Not if we want to find the truth, I countered. Why are you so concerned about an investigation if you have nothing to hide? Thomas stood abruptly. I don't have to sit here and be accused by someone who's barely part of this company, let alone this family. Thomas, Amanda said quietly, putting a hand on his arm. Calm down. But Thomas was already gathering his things. I need some air. This is ridiculous. He stormed out of the conference room, leaving an awkward silence in his wake. That was quite a reaction, I observed mildly. My father sighed heavily. Matt, are you absolutely certain about this embezzlement claim? Could it be a mistake? I've triple-checked the logs and transaction records. It's not a mistake. Someone has been systematically siphoning funds through a complex series of microtransactions. It's cleverly done, nearly invisible, unless you know exactly what to look for. And how did you know what to look for? Amanda asked, a strange note in her voice. Because I designed the security system to detect exactly this kind of activity, I explained. But someone disabled those alerts 18 months ago. The implications hung heavy in the air. Only someone with intimate knowledge of both the financial systems and the security protocols could have executed such a scheme. The list of potential suspects was very short, and Thomas's reaction had just moved him to the top. I need to continue working, I said, standing up. With your permission, I'll set up a secure workstation and dive deeper into the transaction records. My father nodded, looking suddenly every bit his 62 years. Do what you need to do, just be certain before making any accusations we can't take back. I worked through the night, following digital breadcrumbs through layers of transactions. By morning, I had compiled incontrovertible evidence. Thomas had been embezzling funds for nearly 2 years, starting with small test transactions and gradually increasing in boldness. The recent security breach had been his attempt to cover his tracks as he prepared for a final large extraction that would have crippled the company. When I presented my findings to my father the next morning, he sat in stunned silence, the printed evidence spread across his desk. How much, he finally asked. Just over $3 million so far, I answered. But he was positioning to extract another $12 million within the next month. Does Amanda know? I don't have evidence that she was involved, I said carefully. But given their joint accounts and shared expenses, it's hard to believe she didn't benefit or notice something. He buried his face in his hands for a moment, then looked up with renewed determination. What do we do now? That depends on what outcome you want, I replied. If you want to handle this privately, we can secure the systems, recover what funds are still traceable, and part ways with Thomas quietly. If you want justice, we take this evidence to the authorities. And you would help us do that. Even after everything. I met his gaze steadily. I'm here as a professional doing my job, not as your son. My personal feelings don't factor into my ethical obligations. He nodded slowly. Before we decide anything, I owe you an apology. We were wrong about Jessica. Completely wrong. And the way we treated you both was inexcusable. The words I had wanted to hear for weeks now felt hollow in the face of this larger crisis. Thank you for saying that. But right now we need to focus on stopping Thomas before he realizes we're onto him. Of course, he agreed. What do you recommend? Call an emergency board meeting. Present the evidence. Have security ready to escort Thomas from the building, and contact the authorities. This isn't just a family matter anymore. It's fraud on a massive scale. As I outlined the necessary steps, I realized that the power dynamic between us had fundamentally shifted. For the first time in my life, my father was looking to me for guidance rather than the other way around. The family that had judged me inadequate now depended on my expertise to save them from disaster. It wasn't the reconciliation I might have imagined, but it was something more valuable: recognition of my worth on my own terms, not theirs. The next 48 hours unfolded like scenes from a corporate thriller. My father called an emergency board meeting where I presented the evidence of Thomas's embezzlement. Security was waiting to escort him from the building, and police officers arrived shortly after to take him into custody. The look of betrayal on Amanda's face, when she realized what her husband had done, would haunt me for years. In the aftermath, we discovered that Thomas had been methodically stealing from the company almost from the day he joined, starting small and growing bolder as he gained my father's trust. The money had funded a secret lifestyle, a second apartment, expensive gambling habits, and investments in high-risk ventures that had mostly failed. Amanda had been kept in the dark through elaborate deceptions and separate accounts. My sister was devastated. Her perfect marriage had been a facade. Her trusted partner, a thief who had betrayed not just the company but her personally. When investigators discovered evidence that Thomas had been planning to disappear with the final large extraction, leaving Amanda behind to face the consequences, her humiliation was complete. I spent 2 more weeks at the company rebuilding security systems and helping recover what funds could be traced. It was exhausting, detailed work, but also deeply satisfying to see the company stabilize under my guidance. Employees who had known me since childhood now looked at me with newfound respect. My father, too, seemed to see me through new eyes, consulting me on decisions he would once have made unilaterally. Throughout this time, Jessica was my anchor. Each night I came home mentally drained, and she would listen as I processed the day's events, offering perspective when I needed it and silence when I didn't. She never once said "I told you so" or expressed resentment toward my family despite their earlier treatment of her. The professional resolution came more quickly than the personal one. Once the immediate crisis had passed and the company was secure again, the more difficult work of rebuilding family relationships began. My mother was the first to reach out, calling me at home one evening. Matthew, her voice was tentative, so unlike her usual confidence. "I want to apologize. What we did, how we treated Jessica, how we treated you. It was unforgivable." "Why did you do it?" I asked the question that had haunted me for weeks. She was quiet for a moment. "Fear, I think. Fear of losing you to a life we didn't understand. Fear that you would make mistakes we couldn't protect you from. But mostly fear that you didn't need us anymore, that you had found happiness without our approval." It was the most honest conversation we'd ever had. "I do need you, Mom," I said finally. "Just not in the way you thought. I need your support, not your control. I need you to trust that you raised me well enough to make my own choices." "I understand that now," she replied, her voice thick with emotion. "Would you and Jessica consider coming to dinner this Sunday? No expectations, just a new beginning." That first dinner was awkward, tense, with unspoken history and fresh wounds. Jessica was gracious, but guarded. My parents were trying too hard, their usual confidence replaced with careful politeness. Amanda, still reeling from Thomas's betrayal and pending divorce, was quiet and withdrawn. But it was a start. Over the following months, new patterns emerged. Sunday dinners resumed, but with fundamental differences. The conversation was more balanced, with genuine interest in everyone's perspectives. My father asked questions about my work and actually listened to the answers. My mother made sincere efforts to know Jessica as a person rather than as a social liability. The most profound change was in Amanda. Thomas's betrayal had shattered her perfect life and forced her to confront uncomfortable truths about the values our parents had instilled in us. As she rebuilt her life as a single woman, we found common ground we'd never had before. The golden child and the black sheep, both now seeing our parents with clearer, more compassionate eyes. 6 months after the fateful dinner that had torn us apart, Jessica and I were married in a small ceremony at the Botanical Gardens. My parents were present, but not central to the celebration. They had earned their place at our wedding through months of genuine effort and changed behavior, not through family obligation. In his toast, my father surprised everyone with his candor. "I once thought I knew exactly what success looked like," he said, raising his glass. "I was wrong. True success is having the courage to build a life based on love and integrity, even when that means standing up to those who should have supported you from the beginning. Matt and Jessica, you've taught us what real strength looks like. We're honored to be part of your lives." It wasn't a fairy tale reconciliation. There were still moments of tension, old patterns, that threatened to resurface painful memories that couldn't be erased. But there was also something new and precious: respect. My parents had finally come to see me as an adult with valid choices, rather than a child to be directed. And I had learned to set boundaries that protected what mattered most to me. 1 year after being told to consider myself a stranger, I found myself at yet another Sunday dinner watching, as my father played blocks with Lily, while my mother and Jessica discussed plans for the school where Jessica taught. Amanda was dating again, cautiously, but with a new wisdom about what truly mattered in a partner. "You okay?" Jessica asked, noticing my thoughtful expression. "Just reflecting," I replied. "If you had told me a year ago that we'd be here like this, I wouldn't have believed it." She squeezed my hand. Sometimes the hardest moments lead to the best changes. And she was right. The family that sat around that table was not perfect. We carried scars from our past and would likely make new mistakes in our future. But we were more authentic now, more honest about our flaws, and more appreciative of our strengths. The crisis that had torn us apart had ultimately forced us to rebuild on a foundation of truth rather than appearances. As I looked around at these imperfect people who had caused me both pain and joy, I realized that the most valuable lesson from this entire ordeal wasn't about family loyalty or standing up for myself, though those were important. It was about the power of living authentically, of having the courage to be true to your values, even when it costs you dearly. Because sometimes, what seems like an ending is actually the painful but necessary beginning of something far better than you ever imagined possible. Have you ever had to stand up for yourself against family pressure? How did you handle it? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more real-life experiences. And if you know someone who might be struggling with family expectations, share this video with them. Sometimes knowing you're not alone can make all the difference. Thank you for listening, and remember, the family you choose can be just as important as the family you're born into.